Happy New Year. It is January 1st and it is 2023, the year of the GOAT, Michael Jordan. So I figured I might as well end the paralysis by analysis, which is where I've basically been stalling on launching this podcast. We'll get into it a little bit later on why I'm doing this. But I've been wanting to write a couple books for a while, and I thought this is the best opportunity to actually get the content out of my head and actually into some type of digital format that I could eventually convert to something else. But before we get started, I want to dedicate this to my family, specifically my girls, beautiful wife Sarah, for always being there and being my muse. Anyone out there that's listening, this is going to really be about economic development and also about personal development. And if you do not have a muse, I highly recommend you get one because they can help you and guide you and inspire you, honestly, in order to get to you where you want to be and to reach your full potential. But also to both my daughters who inspire me additionally and actually give me a little bit more motivation to be the best version of me. About me, myself, why we're actually doing this. My name is Pat Hoban, and this is going to be called the Pat Hoban Experiment, where I'm actually going to try to convert, like I said earlier, these video and audio files using a couple different systems that I've been playing around with in the past in a professional capacity, but now I want to try to use them on a personal level to actually, like I said, get the things out of my head and hopefully on paper and into some type of a digital version to leave a legacy later on. But a little bit more about me. For those that do not know me, I am an economic developer currently for the McLean County and for our organization, which is the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council. Here in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois, right in the center of the state. It's a great place to be. I've been doing economic development for about 15 years. Hard to believe, it's flown by. But with that came a lot of growth and a lot of opportunity to climb up the career ladder, which is something I actually wanted to talk about going forward in future episodes. Just kind of how I made those leaps and bounds. I mean, honestly, if you look at the career trajectory from when I started off 15 years ago, just totally new to the industry, to now I'm a CEO running my own organization. It was a pretty quick path up to the top of where I want to be. But going forward, like I said, I want to write the books. I want to eventually get on some type of a speaking tour for the books themselves, and then sometime in the future consult. So I think this is a good transition, an opportunity for me to basically let everybody know how I did what I did. And the other side of this is I used to be a football coach at a high school level, and I do miss the mentoring side. So I'm hoping that I can combine the economic development to help out all the new economic developers there, maybe even some of the seasoned ones like myself on some of the newer techniques that we're using. And honestly, for the elected officials and our public that don't really understand economic development as much as we probably should, because it is kind of a foreign language. We kind of keep things behind closed doors on how we do what we do. So hopefully with one episode at a time, I can try to dive into different tips and techniques and really the why on why we're doing economic development and what it really means to the community, to our businesses, and to the investors themselves. And then on the personal side and the growth side, there's a couple different techniques that I've come up with that have helped me along the way. So I'm hoping that that'll help. But a little bit more about myself. I grew up in Central Illinois, went to Millikin University. I was a community college kid for about a decade because when I was younger, I honestly couldn't figure out what the heck I wanted to do. Because of that, though, I was actually a college dropout in the beginning. So a lot of the conversations that we'll be having will be about resilience and some of the techniques, basically that kind of fall along the lines of failing forward, that you make incremental growth. Just because you have failed doesn't mean that it's over. You can persevere, as I have. So using some of the different mental models that I use now to try to get over that. From Millikin, I ended up getting a bachelor's in organizational leadership. At that time, though, I was already working for an EDC. My background at that time was in graphic design and web design. And it was kind of funny because even at the time when I was a graphic artist, people would ask, okay, if you do websites, are you on the design side or are you on the development side? And I didn't realize that you had to be one or the other. But when it comes to web design and web development, there's usually coders in the back that help, with the structure in the back end. And then there's the design that work on the user experience. And I did both. I didn't realize that it was a thing that you had to be one or the other. So that's something I've always carried forward. And like I said, we'll talk about in future episodes on how you can basically be more than one thing. Don't ever put yourself in a box. I was also an athlete. I was a football player. I was a wrestler, but I was also an art major and I was an art student. And those things didn't really go hand in hand at the time, especially back in the 90s. So it's more back to that. And another example, I guess you could say, when I was doing the graphic design, I remember I was a bartender, working my way through school, and somebody had came in and wanted to talk to Patrick, and they said, "Oh, he's over there behind the bar," and the guy said, "No, I want to talk to Patrick, the web designer," and they're like, "No, that's him," and so that was a stereotype that I dealt with a little bit earlier on because I didn't look like a typical art major whenever I was in college, and I also didn't look like a web designer, I guess, whatever that means. So it's something that, like I said, we'll talk about future episodes. Hopefully have some guests on. So if there's anyone you guys like to hear from, but really the goal is to kind of educate, inspire, talk about, what motivates me, what inspires me. Hopefully same things that can work for you, but then also get on the community development side as well. Because ideally, if we're all better versions of ourselves, then the community as a whole is going to be better also. All right, let's jump into, well, actually, there's more about me. I didn't finish the whole story. So after I got done with Millikin University with organizational leadership, had the opportunity to take a job up in Tinley Park, Illinois, doing economic development, which just happened to be close to Notre Dame. So at that time, I had a bachelor's in organizational leadership. I had gone through all the economic development training that I could, specifically through the University of Oklahoma's Economic Development Institute. I became a certified economic developer. I got a designation, the Economic Development Finance Professional designation by the National Development Council, which lets me actually look at the books and look at projections and be able to let a community know whether we should incentivize a project or not, because we want to make sure that we're getting our return on that investment. At that time, when I got up to Tinley, I realized that Notre Dame was right around the corner and I could actually go for a master's in business analytics. I've always loved numbers. I've loved the coding side back from my web days. And I thought this was a good opportunity to combine that with my new economic development knowledge. So the combination of having the data, having the analytics to back things up, with a lot of the incentives that we were doing on top of the finances, really qualified me for the next job, which was to come back to Central Illinois and take over as CEO of the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council, which is where I've been for about 3 years now. I got a wonderful staff. We're doing great things. Some of the projects that you guys might have heard of, Rivian Automotive has been going gangbusters there, building their adventure vehicles. We also announced Ferrero, the chocolate factory. They're building a literal chocolate factory right next to my house down the road, which will be nice because hopefully the whole neighborhood will smell like chocolate pretty soon. But they came in originally and planned to convert the plant and bring in some new lines, and eventually said that, we'd like to have the chocolate made somewhere in North America, and we were battling between Canada and Mexico, and we won, so they're going to build that here. And we did such a great job that they decided that they want to go ahead and do another expansion as well and bring in the Kinder Bueno line. So that's something I know that my kids are going to be happy about because that's one of their favorite lines of chocolate, but that'll be built right up the road. So things are going really well here in Bloomington Normal. We've got a lot of best practices when it comes to economic development. But then on the personal development side too, we've had a lot of challenges for our family, but also me personally. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people, especially males, talk about. It's something that coaches talked about. So I do miss the coaching aspect. I miss that one-on-one relationship with our players and being able to just have another voice, out there to let them know that, things are going to get hard, but there are ways to get through them. And so that's what I want to hopefully be able to talk about and get through on this podcast and now video. Honestly, I did not plan on having a video today, but I went to launch Anchor. So I'm going to use Anchor FM. And that's the other thing. As I'm doing this, I want to talk about all the technology, document all this on how it's going. So if you guys have any best practices or tips or even better lighting, I obviously see I need some type of a ring light in here besides the two that I've got set up. But as I launched Anchor, they had partnered with Riverside FM. And so I just now have not played around with Riverside. Went ahead and launched this and took off my hoodie and put on this polo and set up some lights in here for my little makeshift studio, which is actually inside of a closet with one of the comforters behind me hanging. That's supposedly supposed to help out with the audio. I'm not going to know if the audio is any better in here compared to doing it in the office until I actually launch this thing and get feedback from you guys. So definitely let me know. But as I mentioned, we're going to use Anchor in order to launch this thing, because Anchor is a cool way that you can upload your audio, now video, with Riverside. And then from there, it'll push it out to where all the other podcasts are, specifically Spotify, I know, and also onto Apple as well. So that's what we had used at work. Anchor's been great. So we'll see how it works on this one. All right, into why I'm doing this. So the podcast itself is something that, like we do one at work. It is called Building BN. It's a way that we can talk to our local businesses and also developers in the area to try to explain, what the heck's going on in the community. Because as I mentioned earlier, we don't do a very good job of telling our story when it comes to economic development. We never really have. I don't know if that's because you're usually too busy working on projects that you kind of forget to celebrate every now and again. So this is an opportunity that I thought that if I could do the podcast, I could find another system. I know there's a couple different ones out there. I think Happy Scribe is one where you can actually take this audio and it'll convert it all into text. Because my ultimate goal is to write 2 books, one on economic development and one on personal development. Ideally, those are the 2 just to get started. But I've got a couple different structures I've given different speeches on, and people basically told me afterwards that they haven't heard what I do or my framework explained the way that I explain it. So I always get positive feedback, so I want to go ahead and put that on paper. Hopefully it gets on paper someday, but for now we'll start off and hopefully get a digital copy uploaded that people can be able to see, that hopefully will lead to more speaking engagements. And I've had paid speaking engagements before. In the past, they've been for personal branding, especially when it comes to college students. Whenever you're trying to, get better resumes, stand out, how do you utilize LinkedIn to try to get that job fresh out of college, and use social media really to portray the version of you want to portray. Because too many times, people are on social media, they don't realize how many people are actually watching. And one of the things I always recommended to the students was to Google themselves before, before you're going for that job interview. Go see what, the interviewer is going to see as well. So go ahead and Google yourself now or whenever you get off of this and see what comes up, and try to get down any photos or any posts or anything that if you were a hiring manager that you might find offensive or would actually turn into a red flag, because we do it every single time before we hire anybody, especially because of the world that we're in. It is very political. We represent entire communities. So you want to make sure that you are a good representative of the community, whether that's Twitter posts, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. There's so many outlets now that I don't think a lot of people realize, what they're putting out there. So just be really mindful about that. Some of the other speeches, actually I got one lined up this month, and the theme is stronger. It's going to be for a bank, and I'm writing that now. And it does actually go along with the personal development book. So it's going to be based on resilience, and I think that this is a good time to do something like this after coming out of 2020, 2021, 2022. We've definitely had some hard times, but I think the theory, and I don't even know who gave this quote, but it's that hard times create strong people, and strong people create good times, and good times create weak people, and weak people create hard times. So it is a cycle. And it's something that I can relate to personally, because whenever I was younger, I took a lot of things for granted, period. I was always about 6'2", was always an athlete. It was something that I had different scholarships, went to different camps, thought it was always going to be there, never really capitalized on it. And something like I said, we'll get into in future episodes on some of my failures. But looking back, I would love to go back and just slap myself, honestly, and say, hey, you're wasting a lot of potential right now. And it's something I've actually been told in the past. And looking back, I didn't realize it at the time because, whenever you're young, you kind of think that you're invincible, and truth is you're not. We've lost a lot of friends, a lot of family, and it's something that, it weighs heavy on my heart. But at this time, I think it's something that I can share. So, as we get into other episodes and have different guests on, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how to deal with some depression, some anxiety, some grief that's out there, and just stress in general. I mean, stress doesn't really go away. I like to say that you don't get rid of problems, you can find better ones. But I don't think there's anything as a stress-free life, because, people are always going through something that you're not aware of. And so I think that the key with any of this, and even the theme of 2023, besides doing great things, is, just be kind, because you don't understand. People are trying to do the best they can from their point of view. And I even struggle, and at times I'm trying to work on, if I can focus and remind myself that I have to meet people where they are, not where I want them to be. And that's something I've always struggled with because of my personality type, because of the analytical background, and because of the I guess the athlete side in me. It's that there's a way, and I usually figure things out pretty quick from my point of view, but not necessarily from everyone else's point of view. So one of the big things at Millikin University was the team dynamics. That was a wonderful class that was really based off of the different personality profiles and how to work with other people that aren't like you. It's not like you go into a boxing gym and everyone has similar personality types. That's why they're there. Or even on a football team, you guys have a similar mission, and you're out there to work as a team to, you know, kind of bring all the right pieces together. And the mindset is a little bit, I say, rougher, and that does not work in the professional world. And that's something I've had to learn on my own. So when it comes to economic development, that's going to be probably the first book. And honestly, I could probably do these a bit at the same time. And just so you guys know what to expect with this podcast, it'll probably bounce back and forth. We might talk about some economic development topics one episode. Next episode, it might be personal development. And it could honestly be because whoever the guest is that we have on, we might have somebody on that's great, has a great business story, or has experience doing one of the elements or one of the objectives in Econ Dev, but has some personal, experience as well, that's, on how they accomplish things. So out of that one episode, we might get multiple topics. So the idea is following off of Tim Ferriss. He's written multiple books, and using similar techniques. So a lot of the things that I'm doing right now and even writing about, it's all things that I've seen and read before. And as I've read up on, I think it's Ryan Holiday, great author. I love his work, but a lot of the stuff that he's quoting now are all from the Stoics. So the rewriting, it's not really that new of an idea. It's just the way that it's interpreted, and that's what I plan on doing too. Is just the way that I can translate economic development, hopefully in a way that everyone else can understand. And the same thing with personal development. There's so many self-help books out there or motivational books, and honestly, even the speech that's coming up I'm going to be giving to this bank, it's kind of in the industry. You're a motivational speaker, but I don't, even as a coach, I don't think you can be a motivational speaker. I think motivation is something that you personally have to motivate yourself. No one else can motivate you. You literally have to choose to motivate yourself that day. Now, you can be inspired, and that's hopefully with some of the stories and that we'll go over in different techniques. It's finding that separation, because I think that when it comes to inspiration, that's your drive. And as cheesy as it sounds, I think you can honestly accomplish anything you want, whether that's career-wise, whether it's personal goals, health-wise. If you've got three things, and those are the categories that our topics and guests are going to be under. But if you got that drive, if you have that inspiration, if you have direction, if you know where the heck you're going, and if you have the discipline to follow up and not just stay the course. I mean, stay the course is very important, but to be able to reassess. And I think that's something that I know I struggle with. At the end of the day, you don't want to get stuck in your ways. And I honestly believe that through drive, direction, and discipline, based on the different phases of your career, not just being ageist, it's just in the beginning, I think that you have a lot of drive. So if I look back early on in my career, I had information, but I didn't have knowledge. Like, I had everything from the textbooks. I had seen what other people have done, but I didn't have the knowledge to know when to do it. And then I think as you even get older, after you have knowledge and you have wisdom. So I think when wisdom comes along, it's just not just, what to do, when to do it, but, who you should be doing that with, because there's a whole game outside of the politics that you see on TV. So I mean, there's office politics. There's a lot of people that are out there not really looking out for your best interest, and there's ways to actually, benefit from them. And that's something I had earlier on in my career, where I had a hard time, honestly, portraying or explaining what was inside my head, getting that out. So I joined Toastmasters, which is one of the reasons that I'm able to give this podcast now and speak in front of a lot of people, because in the beginning, without Toastmasters, and if you don't know what that is, I'll put a link in the description, but it's a wonderful worldwide organization that is like going to the gym, but for public speaking. But also, besides public speaking, it's also for leadership, because as a young professional, you don't have a lot of opportunities to lead meetings. But in Toastmasters, it's an hour-long meeting. You always get to speak, which is great, because in the beginning, I would honestly speak for about 30 to 45 seconds and sit down, because I would get so nervous. I ended up, though, getting almost addicted to that rush that kind of went with it, and knowing and being inspired by the others that were there and seeing how smooth they were with their speaking and the response that they got from the audience, and knowing that communication is so valuable in the career world. I would not have this job, I wouldn't have this position anywhere without the public speaking and Toastmasters. So I highly recommend you checking that out. But also running the meetings. So you do have an opportunity, not every meeting, but you can take on a role to basically run a board meeting. And that's something that I think a lot of people take for granted until they're in that situation. And the best part about it is Toastmasters is, as you're giving a speech or as you're giving a meeting, there are evaluators, and they will let you know, what they like and what they didn't like to hopefully help you get rid of your filler words. And even now, as I'm talking, I'm catching myself with some too many so's, too many ums, something that I need to definitely work on, because I haven't been in Toastmasters for a while. But hopefully, as this podcast goes on, especially if we have other guests in here, we'll iron some of that out and really build this self-help book, this inspirational book, this personal development book is really what it is, to hopefully, meet your needs, but also meet my needs going forward. And we'll learn from each other. That's the beauty of the podcast, and we'll learn from our guests. And same with economic development. Like, I'm not saying that I know everything there is to know about economic development. There's so many communities in this nation and actually in the world that are all doing it a little bit different. I just know that it works in Illinois, specifically in central Illinois, but I'd love to hear from other people that I've gone to conferences with. Down in Florida, South Carolina does things completely different than the way that we do. And everyone has different resources. And to me, it kind of relates back to people. Like, everyone has their different strengths and weaknesses, just like a community, but we can all develop. So besides the personal development side with the drive, direction, and discipline, when it comes to economic development, I really think you only need three things, which is one, resources. You have to have the resources. Two, you got to have your businesses. And if your businesses have solid resources, then they will invest. And so in economic development, it's really our role to get our businesses, current ones and future ones, to invest and reinvest in our communities, which give us, more of a return for the tax base, which can go back to developing more resources and helping our businesses out. So it is a cycle. Same thing with the personal development, it's a cycle as well. I'm really oversimplifying it at this level for this first episode, but as we dive into the individual topics under each one of those, I think it'll make a little bit more sense. And then as I start to draw it out, I'm not sure what tech we're going to use to do that. I might use some Miro boards, which is an online whiteboarding process, which is pretty cool to do some illustrations. There's also a possibility of maybe using Tableau, which is usually used for data visualization, but that's another thing I think it would be cool to have, which I'm not seeing a lot of in the economic development world, is data visualization backing up some of the economic theories. Same thing with personal development. So if I can add data viz to personal development and economic development, I think it'll be unique. But I don't know. I'll hear from you guys and find out what works, what doesn't, and we'll adjust. And I think that's the whole thing with economic development, and actually personal development too, is that last phase that not a lot of people are taking a step back and assessing, what's working and what's not. And I really I believe in that. It's something I would do for a while and kind of get off of. But hey, new year, new me, new you. So here's some things that hopefully work and that we can get into a routine and amend as we need to. So ideally, I do this at least once a week, maybe more. It really depends on when the topics come to me and I can actually get into my studio and pop this open and see what kind of listeners we get and what kind of feedback. But like I said, this is for you and me. So with that, going back to you, I already did put up a post when I said I was going to launch this and ask for some questions. And so to get underneath the questions that were already turned in, I know I got one from, I lost the place of it. Dave Shields did send in a question. Let me get back to this. And Dave is a good friend. He is from Bloomington Normal, up in Chicago now, but a part of a dinner group that we have, which we call the 511 Club. And that is because in central Illinois, you can honestly get anywhere in about 15 minutes. So most people get off at 5, and we are guaranteed to be there by 5 minutes or 11 after 5. So Dave's question, holy cow, how long ago did I post this? This is back to the paralysis by analysis. I posted a picture of this microphone saying I was going to do this back in October, and just now finally pulling the trigger because I didn't know the structure of the podcast or how I was going to use it. And man, so good thing it's a new year. Okay. So when it comes to Dave's question, he asks the intersection of economic development and environmental stewardship. That in itself is a book, honestly. So when it comes to environmental stewardship, you want your companies to, you want to be sustainable, you want to be successful, but you also want them to be environmentally friendly and good for the community. Honestly, you want good community partners. And luckily for us here in Bloomington Normal, we have great community partners, people that really give back, different companies that give back too. So that's fantastic. And then, so I think the question might be, Mike, is that something that you incentivize or is it something that you require? And in economic development, we almost always, and I say almost because everything depends, and you guys are going to get tired of hearing me say that. And that's something I picked up from Notre Dame when it comes to doing predictive models, is that it depends. Like nothing's guaranteed. So when it comes to incentives compared to requiring it, making it law, if it should happen or should not, I'd rather lean on incentives. So I would rather it be that you don't require something in your community that the community next door doesn't. So if you say you have to be have environmental stewardship and you have a bunch of policies that require that, there's different green building techniques when it comes to minimizing impact on your environment, on the community itself, using the latest and greatest. It doesn't matter if it's renewable energy. If you require that and then the neighbors next door do not, I've seen this happen from experience, especially in Chicagoland, where all the different communities are right next to each other. It's like you literally cross the street, you're in another community. I've seen companies leave, they come to us and say, hey, I just want to leave this one county and jump across the street to this one because of the requirements or because of the taxes. So I would rather work with the carrot and not the stick. Not to say that there's times that you're going to use the stick. You have to in some instances, but I'd rather incentivize it, which almost leads into our next question, which is from Anne. And Anne had asked, I think it was about grants. Yes, grants are always a great topic. How to find them, how to apply, and maintain the requirements. Again, that's an entire book, and I guarantee you there are books out there on grant writing itself. Grants.gov, number one place to go for that, and you're going to see a ton of different examples that are on there. And the best way that I know to get grants, to get dollars that come in, because you'll see it's frustrating, especially earlier in my career, whenever I'd watch another community get federal dollars out of some program I've never even heard of for like a new dock. And I'm like, how did they get money for a dock? That doesn't make any sense. I didn't see any program for that. Well, you got to go to grants.gov. You have to research every grant that's on there and use the search feature that's on there and see if it lines up with whatever you're trying to do. Because a lot of times the grants can be pretty creative. And whenever they're coming out, if you see a new bill, there's a new bill coming through right now, look at what those dollars are going towards. Because most of the time when it comes for a grant, the elected officials have something in their head on what they want to do, but it's up to the staff. So all the different agencies, so the EDA, Economic Development Agency, I think that's the right acronym, probably not. No, EDA is Economic Development Administration. Um, Go talk to them and find out what their programs are, because the bill will get passed based off of the elected officials concept on where they want the dollars to go and who to help, but it's honestly up to the staff to be able to figure out how to allocate those dollars. So your best friends are the staff. Now the hardest part though is these grants are all administered by different agencies, and there's so many agencies, whether that is local, whether it's state, whether it's federal. You need to find somebody that's like an economic developer or an SBDC, a small business development center. They can tap into a lot of grants and manage some grants themselves. But local, states, and then the feds for sure. There's so many agencies there, but find the staff that is in charge of the grants, and then they will let what the requirements are. And then from there, it's all about telling a story. So what every story or every sales pitch that I've ever done, and even a lot of speeches, it's based off of the hero's journey, which is a challenge, a struggle, a resolution. And when it comes to grant writing, you want to make sure that you or your company or your nonprofit that you're working for, that you let them know what the challenge is and that you struggled to do this before, and that the solution, the resolution, is the grant. Because at the end of the day, that elected official, that staff that is running that program, they want to come in and they want to be the hero. They want to say that we helped this organization out, which in turn helped whatever this cause was because of this grant. That's why they write them. There's also different styles of grants. Not all grants are just cash. There are some, but a lot of them are matching. So you have to show like how you're going to match that. And then when it comes to reporting requirements too, every grant program is different. Different incentive programs are different too. Sometimes the way incentives are written, it sounds good in theory, but it's underutilized because of the reporting requirements. We've got some of those in Illinois, but luckily for us, the new Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, the directors have been awesome this go around. Even with the governor's new programs that are coming out, they are listening to the economic developers. They are amending the programs and creating new programs. So we have new tools in the toolbox, and that's what you want. Because the last thing, even myself, like we administer different grant programs or low interest loans or zero interest loans. And if the rules are there and the requirements are too stringent, almost like back to Dave's question, if it's easier to go somewhere else, they're going to go somewhere else. So you want to listen and you want to make the adjustments as necessary. It almost goes back to the personal development side too, which is the reflection. If it's not working, you have to change it. So your goal to get the grants is going to be to find the program, read the bills when they come out, but grants.gov has most of them listed, and then look for the agency. And then once you see that agency, contact somebody and say, hey, I'd like to learn more about this program. I know a lot of people are short-staffed now, so hopefully they've got a lot of it written, but you need to write the grant in a way that, like I said, follow that hero's journey that is going to use their program and their dollars to benefit your cause that will help out so many people. And then, but before you do that, read heavily and study the requirements, because sometimes the requirements require so much reporting and time and effort to do it. It's not really worth the dollars coming in. You'd have to hire a full-time staff just to do the reporting requirements. We've had that happen before too. So yeah, do your homework. I'm sure we can get more into it later on for another topic, especially with sustainability as well, because there's a lot of cool things going on, especially in Central Illinois. I know Bloomington Normal is in McLean County, top wind producer in the state. So we got a lot of wind farms up here, and I know solar is coming next. And there's solar programs that kind of come and gone, but I think there's another round coming out when it comes to sustainability. But honestly, for us in economic development, the goal is to leave the community better than you found it. And that's the sustainability is a huge part of it, especially when it comes to environmental friendliness. But then also on the social side, like you want to make sure that the jobs that are coming in, let everybody rise up the ladder. Like that's the goal. Like if we're just here to help our businesses make money, that's not true economic development. Like economic development is the entire economy. So if the entire economy is spinning, that means everybody's making more money, and that the tax burden on everyone is being lessened. So that's the goal, is that you've got more taxes coming in from more people, so it's spreading that burden around, and then everyone's making more money on top of it, which increases more investment that's going on. It's something that is happening right now here, and actually in Illinois. Like I've never seen it this much investment or this much interest. I think that we've hit over the last 2 years, almost 3 years now, 100 jobs, not 100 jobs, 100 different projects each year. So that's a lot of people that are interested, because back in the day when I was doing this early in my career, there was nowhere near this much interest, in Illinois. But we've been getting a lot of wins recently, and that has to do with all the investment and people. They follow momentum. And that's what a lot of this is about. I think each system, as we get into it, it's going to be a flywheel effect when it comes to personal development. You'll notice that it's easy to get into a rut and have no momentum going on at all. Same thing with economic development. You can stall, if you fumble the ball. But because it is a system, you can get that thing going again, but you have to start somewhere, which is honestly what I'm doing here today, getting this thing going. And the last question, it's not actually for me, it's going to be for you. So for the listeners, I guess, what do you want to know about when it comes to economic development? And I'll probably list some different topics. If there's any guests that you think that we should have on here, when it comes to inspiration, motivation, I'm really looking for people that are resilient, so that have failed. I'll probably get into more of my stories too, as we have some more people on. It's kind of weird talking to myself right now. I'm used to doing podcasts with other guests, and actually having an audience. Whenever I do Toastmasters or speak in front of groups, there is an audience out there, so there's no interaction right now. So we might look into trying to do this live to see, how that goes. I got a theory, though, it could be distraction having all these text boxes pop up as we're doing this, but we'll see. So the other part of this, I want to let you guys know, I don't want to edit these a ton. I want people to see that there are flaws in this and that we do improve over time. So in the beginning, it might be a little bit rough, but let me know what you think. Let me know what topics you guys want to cover, any guests that we should have on. And yeah, hopefully I'll have another one out pretty soon, but let me know what you think. Thanks. Oh, and do great things.